right, Dan, you ready?
Yeah.
All right, Tyler, you ready?
Sure, man.
Been a little while. Timeout. Tyler, who we taking the timeout with today?
Kevin, it has been a while. Good to see you, man. And ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages up in the 585 and down here in whatever area code in Dallas I'm in, we have Daniel Bajus, the owner of Limitless Physical Therapy Specialists. Daniel, thanks for jumping on the show with Kevin and I. Like we said, it's been a little while. We're in season 3 of the show. And Daniel, I just want to kick it off, man. I see right off the bat that you play music. If we're sitting around a campfire right now, I'm just guessing it's acoustic guitar. Am I right?
Yeah, that would be the one.
I pegged you right, man. So acoustic guitar. What sing along are you singing? Your 3 boys, my newborn, and Kevin's 1-year-old right now.
That's a diverse group. I got to get them all going. Jeez, that's
you got the 16-year-old and then you got the 6-week-old. Yeah, that's tough to please.
Well, given the nature of this podcast, maybe like Friends in Low Places or something like that.
Ooh, I like that.
Okay, yeah, that always starts the party. I think everyone in all area codes knows Friends in Low Places, right? I saw
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
documentary. Dude, I didn't know he had millions of people show up at Central Park, with cowboy hats on. Can you believe that?
I was going to say Country Roads, John Denver. I figured that around a campfire. As long as it's not Wheels on the Bus, because that has been the most overplayed song in my house for the last 6 months. So as long as it's not that, Dan, I'm all right. Okay. Where are you taking Tyler and I out to eat? What's your favorite spot here in Rochester? Where are you taking us out for a bite to eat?
Dang, these are tough questions, man. Probably my back porch would be my preference. I'd have you guys over and cook for you. That'd be awesome.
All right. What are we serving? What's the family recipe that you're sharing with us?
Pretty much anything on the grill. We grill year round. I said I got 3 boys, so we feed a lot of mouths all the time, but we love entertaining people and having folks over. So that's a big part of what we do. And it's always better when you can get around your own dinner table and just enjoy people's company in that environment versus sometimes a loud restaurant. But that'd be my preference.
All right. That's all
right. Do you have a Blackstone yet, Daniel?
No, just a big old grill on the back patio. That works great.
I highly advise the Blackstone, dude. I'm slinging out omelets for whatever in a matter of no time on that thing. But I just want to also ask you, do you ever go to a meals over there? I worked in Victor. And I would hit up the meals, no kidding, guys, like 8 days a week sometimes. They'd be like, oh no, the guy's back again.
Yeah, that's solid. That's always good.
Dude, yeah, the hot peppers, my goodness. But yeah, dude, and I was looking at what else is there? My other question for you, Daniel, is kind of like, how did you get into physical therapy?
Kind of a long question. I don't know. Every 17 or 18-year-old pretty much has the world figured out, at that point in their life. But I had a couple of intentions that I was kind of clear on. I knew I wanted to do something helping people. I also had a little bit of exposure to physical therapy as a patient, and I just really liked how it made me feel, not the PT part of it, but just the environment in the office and how healthcare was delivered that way. And so that was a big part of what shaped it. And I guess at the end of the day, just the ability to connect and relate with people is what I gravitated toward. It's different if you've ever been to PT before. You just have a lot more time with your healthcare provider, and you see them for a little more frequent episodes. So like maybe if you have an injury, you might be coming in a couple days a week for an hour at a time. So that's a much more intimate relationship with people. And I kind of gravitated toward that. Versus going, the typical go to an orthopedic specialist and you might see them for 3 minutes or whatever it is, and it's just the nature of the industry, I guess. So as a young guy, I kind of gravitated toward that. And I will say it was definitely Providence that it actually all worked out, because honestly, I didn't know, at 18, like you think but you really don't know. So as part of a bigger plan, I think, for me. So
I love where you kind of just shared your reflections as to why you thought about physical therapy, but it really all started with your intentions first, and then you kind of found the career that allowed you those opportunities. And it's funny sitting here 10 years where I was, I too thought I was getting into physical therapy and physician's assistant. I got a degree in biology, but I chose soccer. I thought soccer was a priority for me going into college. I didn't apply to Nazareth, which had the graduate program, and then life lesson that it's a lot harder to transition into PT school after.
yeah.
So here I am. I've been in sales and now consulting for a long time, but my intentions are very similar to you, and that's always encouraging, enabling, and empowering others, building that relationship. And that's what I loved about healthcare too. I had over 1,000 patient contact hours, but what you spoke of was why I liked PT the most, because it was like the only spot where you really could build and establish a relationship, like a bond. And to your point, they walked in broken, and then you got to see them over time heal and get better, and what that did for their life, and how rewarding that was. So that is so cool to just hear you say. And I just have to ask, because this is probably kind of factored into how you now lead others. You talked about the social connection, getting people and friends and family around your table without all the distractions. What have you learned as leader from a leadership perspective? Are these same intentions, the same intentions that you're holding from a leadership perspective as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I talk a lot about values. That's a big thing for our organization. But for me personally, one of my most important values is the idea of people thriving, or thriving people. And I always thought it extremely ironic that we were in healthcare, and the number one issue in healthcare from an employee standpoint is burnout, right? So we take care of people, but we can't take care of people. Isn't that kind of ironic? So that's really what has shaped my desire, and a lot of the culture in our organization is that main value. So I really believe that if people are thriving, they can take better care of our patients, right, and our customers. So trying to create an environment where that happens, and look for opportunities to move people toward thriving, rather than the other way where we're moving them toward burnout, right? So that's probably the biggest intention behind how I lead, or why I do what I do now as a business owner.
And what's your definition of thriving? Just out of curiosity, like if you had to say this individual, or I'm thriving, what buckets are you prioritizing?
So to me, it means that there's an intentional effort on that person's, an intentional effort from that person to self-reflect, kind of take their own temperature, so to speak, and be intentional about doing the things that do fill their bucket. So self-care is a big piece of that. Self-reflection is a big piece of that. You can look at the different domains of any human, right? So there's a lot of different ways we could think about that. But for instance, if physical fitness is an important part of who you are, and you're neglecting that because of something else, then are you practicing some kind of self-reflection to stop, say, hey, am I addressing this thing that's really important to me? And if not, what do I need to do to make it happen? Just as an example.
I love it. Thank you.
Dude, love it, Daniel. I'm glad we ran into you this morning, afternoon, man. Real quick, let's I gotta rewind a little bit. So being a leader as a father, I just became one about 6 weeks ago, Kevin, about a year and a half ago, I want to say. Is that right, Kev?
Yeah.
What leadership advice, and start with me, please. So Daniel, you're 6.5 weeks into your first boy. Looking back on it, would you have done anything different, or do you have any leadership fatherly advice for, I don't know, a fellow named Tyler White?
I'll tell you the same thing I would tell anyone is only full buckets overflow. So if you're not filling your bucket up and taking care of yourself, it's really hard to give your best to your little one, or to your spouse, or to whoever it is in your life. Same with your team, right? So being intentional about understanding what needs to be coming in, so that you can, is that way, from a father or a spouse perspective. Another one is, this is something, again, that I continue to try to practice. Geez, if I come across in any way today sounding like I've figured it out, just reach through the screen and slap me or something like that. But
No, sir. You are totally free
getting
to
clear.
speak.
Yeah, getting clear on intentions, right? So like, what do you want things to look like in your relationships with your kids or with your spouse, specifically in your family? You know, what do you want things to, what's your intention for your family? You know, those kind of things, starting to think about them and process that, and then put things in place to try to go that direction. So just be intentional about it.
I love the intention drives attention. As one of my friends, Dr. Nick Molinaro, had taught me that, and he's a sports psychologist. But it's really a way to kind of hijack your mind and your brain as a way to enter any meeting, any conversation, any of that. And I love how you're being intentional about what you need first, because if you don't have what you need and you're at 25%, the amount that you can give to others is never going to be enough. So I love what you talked about. You were kind of sharing about you having 3 boys, running your own business, obviously the relationship with your wife, your friends. I've found a best practice shared from a friend, Greg Vanerick, to come up with that personal and professional scorecard. Is that something that you're continuously doing? Like, how are you monitoring yourself to make sure you're still on that path? Because I think balance is hard. Balance is that concept that I can give here and give a little less here. But we're talking about work and life kind of just being life now as a whole. How are you staying on track? How do you make sure that you're not veering too far, putting too much time, energy, and effort in one area and not the other?
It might sound a little crazy, but I've got a lot of thoughts on that. So the first one is having just setting some rhythm of self-reflection. So I weekly and quarterly. I do a weekly kind of preview or review. So I go through and kind of ask a few questions of myself, and I journal through as I set up my next week. So that's an important practice or discipline there. And part of the questions in there is just really simple, kind of what worked well this week and what didn't work well this week. So that's an easy checkpoint. Quarterly, I go through and kind of evaluate that against some of the bigger picture things. So that takes me maybe half a day actually, where I sit down and really think through what were the big milestones that happened last quarter, and again, what worked well, what didn't work well, what adjustments do I need to make in my schedule, what relationships need attention, those kind of bigger questions. So just taking some time to really reflect on it, see how those things are aligning with my intentions that I laid out there. So those are probably, if I could encourage leaders to do one thing that would probably be very transformative, it would be that, just hit that rhythm of self-reflection. The other thing is everyone needs a group of kind of wise people in their life. So I'm fortunate to have several of those wise people in my life in different kind of different environments too. So professionally and personally, that just kind of you can bounce ideas off of. They know you well enough to know if you're off or if things aren't going well. Particularly my wife is excellent at that with me. You know, she's able to kind of see through everything and just she can kind of usually hit the nail right on the head for me with what's going on before I do a lot of times. So those are
Isn't
good.
that amazing?
Those are good checkpoints. Yeah. The other one I would say, this is just a straight up kind of proprietary tool, but it's free. It's through Michael Hyatt and company. I don't know if you're familiar with them. He has this thing called the Life Score Assessment. You do have to give your email away, but it's awesome. It just gives you a little inventory over the different domains of your life. And it just helps you think a little bit more broadly about who you are as a person. And then you can do that periodically and use it as a tool to just kind of check in. We use that with our team. But I do it personally, probably at least once, maybe twice a year. I'll use that tool as part of that. So
that's really
those are some big pillars that
that.
I kind of stand on. Yeah.
And I love the reflection, but I also love the journaling aspect, because I think just writing it down, at least I can say personally for myself, helps me to really think about it and put it on paper. Sometimes it allows me to I guess, connect more dots in my own mind sometimes. So I love the journaling aspect of it. And obviously that social board of directors that you talked about is so important. I think that's really cool. I love that you're focused kind of holistically on the health of your employees to get them to that thriving aspect. And using this life score assessment sounds like a great opportunity for them to reflect throughout the year and see and share back with you maybe where they need additional support or where they don't need any help. So that's awesome. Ty, what do you got?
Hey, Daniel, how do you keep the discipline to do that? Right. Like it all sounds great to me. Like, and I start that kind of stuff, but what like advice do you have to jumpstart your discipline to write every day? Do you do it at a certain time? Do you miss days? Is that okay to miss a couple days? Like, are you really doing this every day? Like, do you have any advice on a set schedule? You know, I know it's a very elementary question, but like how the heck do you keep it up? I want to say.
Yeah. So again, my wife and I had kids really young, right? So I also grew up on a farm, so that's another little detail there. So I'm used to getting up early, but even more so when we had little ones, I just knew the only chunk of time I had was to get up a little bit early. And I have kind of a morning ritual that I go through every morning pretty much. On the weekends, it's a little bit loose, but I still stick to something like that because I'm just kind of hardwired to do it. We had a lot we needed to squeeze into the same 24 hours at that stage in our life. So that's when I really installed that habit. And as far as discipline goes, I would say this has evolved dramatically over years of time, right? So like that compound effect of doing a little bit every day has led to a much more evolved practice there, and using different tools too. So to answer your question directly, what is kind of a tip or some advice? Really, probably sketching out, looking at your days in your week and trying to design a week that you can fit that into somewhere. So if you can automate your week somehow, so you have blocks of time throughout the week that you know you can fit that in, even if it's 20 minutes, you know, that's really not a high investment of time. And that is usually what it would take. You know, you sit down and you can start with there's lots of great resources out there now for journals and or day planners that have prompts in them. There's a ton of them out there. But again, it starts with intention. So if you want to grow as a human, or there's a certain thing that you want to address, that's a great way to do it. You can't do it if you're on autopilot. You have to kind of stop and think and have some direction that way. So.
And I love what you just said right at the end is almost staying in the moment, because I think that we tend to go into autopilot. And I was just having a debate on time, right? Because right now, in the 6-week-old daughter of Tyler's and the 18-month-old, their days seem to pass so slowly, right? Because every single second they're learning something new, and they're just curious, right? Humans, right? Our days go by like this. I have weeks where it's like, holy cow, it's already Friday. Like this week, it's Friday, and I can't believe it's already Friday. But why is that? I feel like I am when I drive to work, like those drives, and you're like, I know I got here. I know I drove here, but I don't remember that ride at all. It's like, am I switching over into autopilot instead of making the most of today? And it sounds like you're very intentional of making the most out of each minute, each hour, each day, to ensure that you're kind of filling your bucket in all these various categories. And the commitment side of it is awesome. I wanted to ask, because you shared it, that you came from a family of 6, and now you add the detail on the farm. What did that dynamic teach you about what like, have you ever, I'm sure you have, reflected on how that helped prepare your views, right? Because I'm from a family of 2, Tyler's from a family of 2. So I've only ever seen those types of environments, but I'm just curious as to how that helped with your development and your experience and who you've become as a leader and a man, Dan.
I think farming itself probably taught a few different things. Big ones would be discipline, generally teamwork, right? It takes a group to be able to get the chores done for the day, that kind of thing. Certainly work ethic. My dad, I love him a lot. He was not one for seeing boys sit around. So I think the whole reason we had a farm was to keep us all busy. I mean, I think that's what it came down to. I think those are some of the big things. Probably the biggest things that influenced who I am as a leader are probably growing up in a household where faith was a really big deal. So that was a big part of what shaped my worldview, and also who I wanted to be as a human, and how I wanted to engage. So that was probably bigger than anything. For establishing kind of my values and how I wanted to do stuff. But that was all in the context of getting up early and doing chores every day and coming home and doing chores every night, those kind of things. Those were that was our normal rhythm. So
it's amazing how, because I can speak for myself, how I tried to separate my personal and professional world so much until the pandemic, until I really got that, I don't know, slap across the face on how ridiculous that way of thinking was. But I think you spoke of that, because there's so many people that are faith-based, right? And they go to church on the weekends, but I don't see those same values, those same principles and ideals that they're listening and obviously value to show up for an hour once a week. I don't see them carrying over into the ways that they handle their values, their actions, the things that they do in some of those leadership positions. How did you get yourself comfortable to bring it in? Do you talk about faith? Is it something that you and your teammates talk about openly, or is it just seemingly how you set your intention?
So, I mean, this is you both have way more experience navigating that dynamic about talking about sensitive things in a workplace, right, than I do. But what I would say is, probably the first thing for me is integrity as a leader. So doing what you say you're going to do, and starting to build a really strong foundation of trust with your team. I don't want to come across and give you the impression that we're evangelizing at work, but we do talk about spiritual things at work for people. That's a very common conversation in a one-to-one with someone. For instance, an example I just had with someone that I knew, faith was a big deal to this person, and I knew that they weren't addressing that. That was something that they weren't doing, and I knew they weren't doing well at work. And I asked the question. I said, "Well, I know we've talked about this before, that this is a big deal for you, and what are you doing to address that in your life outside of work?" And so I had the strength of relationship first to be able to ask that kind of question. And so there's nothing other than time and integrity and saying what you're going to do and then following through with it, and just over time building those relationships that allow you to have those conversations with people. But that's part of my intention as a leader, right? Going back to that same thing, is to be able to have people move toward thriving, right? And so if you see that big hole in someone's life, being able to speak a little truth into that is pretty powerful. It's pretty
Like
cool,
you said,
actually.
Yeah, like you said, that takes that trust, but I hear what you're doing is really humanizing that experience, that relationship, and your vulnerability to talk openly about emotional topics allows you to form those strong bonds and relationships where you can share that feedback, and it's not taken almost as criticism, and that people get defensive. It comes from a place of love. I that's awesome, Dan.
And we have people of different faith backgrounds in our organization who do talk about it, and even in a group setting. So it's just the fact that it's part of who they are, right? And so why wouldn't we want that to be? Why wouldn't we want to know that? That if it's important to you, it should be important to the team. So that's something that we definitely encourage for everyone.
Dude, love it, Dan. And I was going to ask you, man. You seem very at peace, and you seem like you're exactly where you need to be, man. I feel that from you. But I wanted to ask you, what are the things that still challenge you today? And and fears. Do you have any fears or challenges that you're working on currently?
Yes, so many. all the time. So yeah, so probably one of the big things is this thought just came. I don't even know I'm trying to think of where this came to me, but someone's shared with me the idea that failure is being successful at the wrong things. So I've been thinking a lot about that and the directions that we're going in our company. And we're still small enough. We have a team of 27 now, but that's still small enough that all of the decisions tend to affect everyone in the team, so trying to think about what that looks like if we're successful at the wrong things for the team and for myself personally. Fear. I'm trying to think of fears or challenges. I think a challenge that I feel compelled to address all the time is what value am I delivering to my team, and trying to hold myself accountable to that standard, because it's different, right? I've shifted away from patient care at this point, and I'm really my team are my patients. So making sure that it's easy to see at the end of the week if I saw X number of patients and did a great job with that, that's easy. But now trying to measure the health of the team and make sure that our business is sound and those kind of things, making sure that as a CEO or a leader, I'm delivering that value and also moving the whole organization in a positive direction, those kind of things. So those are daunting at times if you kind of sit back and think about them too much, but those would be some of the bigger challenges I'm thinking of right now.
Where do you start your evaluation process there, right? Like when you 27 people, that's a lot of people to me, man. that's enough for me. Where do you start, like to get kind of a pulse on the the spirit of your squad over there?
Spirit of the squad, I love that. I'm gonna steal that.
Dude.
I'm gonna take that and run with it. So great question. I try to it's a blessing and a curse for me, but one of the things I'm good at, gifted at, I would say just naturally, was the ability to pick up on what's going on in people. So one of the things I do as a habit is a couple days a week in each office, I just make a point of connecting with each person. And it might just be hey, Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing? And in about 3 seconds looking at your face, I can usually tell if you're good or bad. So I might be wrong, sometimes, but a lot of times you get a good read on people that way pretty quick. We have a rhythm of checking in. So we do a leadership team meeting, and then different departments have meetings, and we do a section of those meetings that's just kind of checking in on people. We share wins together. So there's interactions where you get, if you just pay attention to what's going on with your team, right? So that's a good one. Those are good metrics for me. Because when people share their wins with the team, we do that at every meeting pretty much. You can tell what's kind of going on, what's top of mind for people. So that's pretty cool. I'm kind of crazy too about the quality of care that we're delivering. And again, that's the outflowing of people doing well personally. It's hard to consistently deliver at a high level the way we want people to if you're not taking good care of yourself. So if you're showing up to work spent, it's going to show, because we really do want people to perform at a high level. Even everyone, our front desk folks, our finance people, especially our PTs, that's a lot you got to give all day long. So paying attention to the quality of service that we're giving folks, those are all barometers for how people are doing. The spirit of the squad.
I just have to say what you had said about how you have started to view your peers, your employees, let's say coworkers, as patients, because I think that just mindset, all kidding aside, but that mindset, right? What is a patient? You as a therapist, you have to ask questions. How does this feel? What does this look like? How are you doing here? When you do this, what happens next? And I'd be willing to step out on a ledge and say that you're probably asking your teams a lot of good questions to really gauge where they're at in their life. How happy and how satisfied are they? What are their challenges? And just going back to how proactive you're planning for the next week ahead, because there's going to be disruptions, there's going to be interruptions, there's things that could potentially throw off that schedule, but you're almost prepared because you've planned. And you can be a little bit more agile and nimble within those environments once you're planning for that week. So I love that. How have you stayed comfortable with change? You mentioned how you've needed to change, how the business has changed. Change is scary for a lot of people. How have you gotten yourself comfortable with change and your team comfortable with the changes that you're making, probably from what you're listening as to what their needs truly are?
Yeah, that's a constant thing, right? Actually, just this week, I challenged myself. COVID is really what helped nail this lesson down. But this week in particular, there was an idea that I was shifting in the wrong direction personally around this thing. And I realized that I was holding that idea really tightly rather than kind of holding it open-handedly. And when I did that, I was becoming kind of emotionally attached to it, or it was, too much so that I couldn't see it clearly. And it was a little thing, but COVID really hammered us with that lesson, right? Our vision just got totally flipped around. So one of the things we've talked a lot about with our team is intentionally holding your values and trying to live your values out, but taking ideas or destinations and try to hold them open-handedly, right? So actually paying attention to and being aware of what your values are, really live those out, and then take that idea that we had out there and be open to seeing that change. That's actually straight from Adam Grant, I believe, is where that idea came from. Just the idea of if we're linking an outcome to our identity, it's really hard to change that. If that outcome changes, it's really hard to roll with that change, because it's kind of this big existential question about who we are. And that was, that's from the book Think Again, Adam Grant. I don't want to take credit for that idea as if it were my own.
Well,
but that
anybody that can't
that's how you roll with change. That's how you roll with change.
I love that.
The reality that you have to kind of unlink who you are as a person with an outcome. And so it's one of those things that says easy and hard, right? Because they're things that you're really committed to and you want to see happen, but all of a sudden it's like, wow, man, that's totally different. And so that's a big way to do it. And then again, I'll bring it back to faith, right? So who I am as a person is hugely shaped by that, my faith in the idea of there being God and God being in control and having a plan for us. So those are kind of some promises that I really try to stand on, but it sure is a pretty normal occurrence where I catch myself kind of clinging on to these ideas, and then all of a sudden it's different and I have to be able to pivot from that. So those are really difficult, but that's how.
I think it's just what you're speaking of, and just to reflect, is human nature. If it's our idea, we're going to be a little bit more emotionally attached to it. But those that listen to this podcast Audible, you did the hand open and a fist, right? And I loved how you showed that graphically, because it's the difference between a fist and an open palm, right? An open palm is welcoming to perspectives, to gain multiple insights. But what I'm hearing you is you're involving others within the decision-making process, because they'll be impacted by that decision, to gain their accountability as well as their perspective to find the best solution that works for everybody. And that's pretty damn powerful, Dan. That's tapping into the collective intelligence of the 27 individuals that you've thought enough to hire and bring a part of the family or the team. So that's special.
I'm loving it. I'm loving not what really, predicting or caring about the outcome, right? In my mind, it's like, I'm going to hit a home run, but I don't care if it's over the left field fence or right field or center field. God's got that part. I'll trot around the bases, score, help my team out, whatever it is. But just letting go of the outcome is what I kind of heard there, Dan. And I'm going to check out Think again, man. That might get me thinking too much, which is always a disaster. But I'd really like to check that out. And you seem like a man of experience, Dan. Like everything we've asked you, you haven't really gone. I mean, sure, you went to this one book you had it this whole time of like 45 minutes, but it's almost been, this was what happened last week. This is what happened yesterday. And I think that's the best way we can tell the story of, straight experience. And I'm thinking I need to be a part of this 5 a.m. club. Do you really find value in what time do you wake up in the morning?
It varies, but yeah.
It's like, do you really want to know?
Yeah, probably around 4:45 is pretty normal. I set my alarm for 5, but it doesn't usually go off, so I usually turn it off and I get out of bed. So,
and are you a coffee
again? It's
guy?
just kind of hard. Oh yeah,
Couple cups.
Okay.
I gotta know.
Couple cups in the morning. Yeah, okay. No, I have a couple cups of coffee. That is, that's the time to shine, I guess. It's quiet. My kids are asleep. My wife's usually asleep, and I can spend some time just doing that, being going through that kind of morning ritual that I have. So,
do you finding time for yourself and making space for that time, giving yourself the ability to self-reflect is key, and really carving out that time?
Yeah. Again, it's happening over time that I'm getting better at the habit of self-reflection, right? So it's something that if you told me about 10 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, I totally self-reflect, but like, the depth of it and kind of what's happening there is very different. And I still feel like a lot of times it's really busy up here in my brain, and it's hard to dial in what I'm thinking about. So another big piece for me is exercising too. So I need time where I can do things, I can move my body to help quiet down my brain a little bit. And that's a habit that helps a ton to try to process some thinking a little bit too. Journaling and journaling is also a huge piece to that for me, honestly, because it does, like Kevin, like you said, it really does sort out your thoughts a lot. It gives you a way to kind of organize them and sort them out a little bit. So I do write quite a bit.
Any other best practices in quieting down your brain?
Oh man, yeah. There's a lot that goes on up there. So that's probably the biggest thing for me, honestly. I know a lot of people talk about mindfulness or centering prayer, different things like that. That definitely helps. But I'm inherently not good at that, which I know you're not supposed to, have a bar for how good you are at your ability to be mindful. But truly for me, moving my body, like exercising, even walking and then trying to think about a thing, or listening to something while I'm walking or jogging, that's a huge way to kind of hack my brain a little bit to focus on that thing.
So cool. But you're talking about the consistency in order for it to become a habit. Otherwise, it's just it's a New Year's resolution. So, which I love, because then you have to back up the action, and that's what you said earlier on in the conversation when you're kind of going through that personal, professional scorecard. What is your intention for this? Because then it leads to action, and what's that first step that you're willing to take? I'm going to take one of my favorite questions that Tyler typically asks, because you seem like a gentleman that probably has a couple good ones in your back pocket. But if we were to put up a billboard, Dan, not about your business, but just a quote of reflection that you would put out on 390 or 490 that people would drive by every morning, noon and night, what would that be to get people to start maybe thinking differently, or challenge a thought, or get them to prioritize something? What would your quote be out to the world?
Geez, that's a hard one. I don't know. I might need to come back to that one. I'm thinking about it.
Well, while you're thinking, Ty, what else you got?
I was just trying to think of what color my billboard would be before I had a message on it. I was like, is it black and white? Is it green and blue? I don't know.
I'm surprised it's not red and white for Arkansas, but yeah. Hog colors, yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, I guess off the top of my head, one of my questions was just a PT question, Dan. I remember when I was a little kid, I had to go to PT. Honestly, my doctor said I had too much stool in my system because my back hurt. And this is our Arkansas doctors, by the way. And but I was always thinking, like, they gave me a notebook, right, of like some like put your knee to your shoulder and all this stuff, like just loosening up the buttocks and the hammies to alleviate your lower back a little bit. I was like, why do I gotta go to a location for this? But I never did it at home, man. It was like what do you think the correlation is for doing it with somebody else? Like there's definitely a different energy when you walk into a PT office like yours to get the job done. Why can't people do it at home? Like I just mentioned, is there some what are your thoughts on whatever the heck I'm saying right now? But besides the too much stool in my system.
You're full of it, brother.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of research out about why people get better and don't get better in healthcare generally. One of the big things is the human connection, right? So physical touch and the human connection are both super important predictors of if people are going to improve or not. Another one that's a mind blower is a patient's belief in getting better dramatically influences getting better, believe it or not. So how strongly you believe in a given treatment or a given prescription from a physician it can be like as much as 30% of the efficacy of the treatment is based on the patient's belief in that treatment, which is a game changer, right? So,
wow.
So if your doctor tells you need to go do XYZ thing, that probably makes a big difference. But the caring connection makes a huge difference. I personally think one of the biggest predictors is the community aspect of it. So when you walk into an office and you see a bunch of people getting better and winning doing that, that's a huge benefit for folks. Ththose are probably all variables.
How about just accountability that they, what I mean? Because I need that. Typically.
Yeah.
I'm a packed animal, right? I ask Tyler sometimes to push me over that ledge. Like I can take myself all the way up there, but sometimes I just need that friendly nudge and then spread, the wings.
Same thing, right? So sometimes people need, it's pretty hard to establish enough of a relationship to look at a patient in the face and say, Kevin, seriously?
Yeah.
Why aren't you doing your stuff?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't come across great on visit one, right? So establishing some relationship over time gives you the ability to speak truth to people. And so that's a huge component of accountability.
So I have to
not
ask,
just showing up.
Did you change, right? Understanding the outcomes, because you're all about quality care and quality medicine. Today, right? I go to a doctor, I get title shy, right? Or by his or hers title, right? And experience. And I think that patient relationship in most situations of my experience has been kind of that top-down approach, right? I know, and I'm telling you what you need to do. But if I don't, similar to how you're making changes within your own business, if I'm not consulted and talked through, and it now becomes my idea, and I believe in what you're telling me, it seems like we almost need to start to transition how that relationship is with the doctor and the patient, or the nurse and the patient, to become more consultative, so then they believe in their progress.
I can talk about this for a really long time.
All right. I wanted to pick your brain because you talked about it. I wonder if this is what he's talking about.
No, I'll try to shorten it up a little bit, but we are intentional from our first phone call to the last interaction you have. And that's a big piece of it. It's interesting, right? So you can know everything I know because of the internet, right? So the power differential that you're speaking of has really shifted quite a bit. So a patient could come in with a lot of information, and so that's definitely changed in the last 15 years of healthcare, like dramatically, right? Because that's about when high-speed internet was becoming more readily accessible, and then Google's trajectory was just crazy. So people have infinite access now to any information. One of the best things that we include we train on it for all positions, but is real-time asking permission. So talking with a patient, for instance, and we were going through your kind of I might finish your physical exam and say something to this effect. Kevin, I've got everything right here on this paper. I'd really like to run through it with you and make sure that I didn't miss anything. Is that okay with you? That would be a very typical question that we might ask a patient. And you should see the looks on patient's face, to your point, like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Like, I've never had that happen in a healthcare setting where someone cared enough to stop and ask me if I should, what? Like, it blows people's mind. But right there, it's like an instant hook because they know you care about what's happening, and it really just makes all the difference in the world. That's probably the most important thing that we teach everybody.
That's so
on the phone, first phone call. Hey, Mrs. Smith, I just wanted to make sure I got everything. Is it okay if I read it back to you just to verify? Versus, it's just a different interaction. So that's probably one of those instant trust builders with patients.
I love that. I love the whole approach, and obviously you taking out on some of those additional insights from the industry and starting to apply the development of your own team to fix the problem. It's enough to know about it, right? And I see you guys actually working towards action to correct the problems once they're identified as to how do you increase the success of what it is that you actually do. Dan, your constant journey, I think, comes from your self-reflection that you're continuously doing, because you're always learning and you're continuously hungry to learn more, but you're evolving and adapting to the changing environment, which is the only consistent is that it's going to continue to change. So it's pretty impressive on how you've kept your foot or finger on the pulse throughout these changes, like you just said, over the last 15 years with the information age. So powerful stuff. Ty, you got
I've got my billboard for you.
All right, yes. Let's hear it.
Person of significance, not a person of success.
Love that.
Boom. Yes, Dan. Bravo.
And I gotta quote it. I'll quote it again because it's not me. It's Clint Pulver. He's another author, great author.
Important is reading for you as a leader?
I read a lot. Yeah, I do. I read a lot of books and I'm trying to actually read a little bit less and apply more of what I read. So
I think when I read, I have to journal as well, because otherwise I don't retain a lot of the information that I'm reading to apply. Have you tried it?
Yeah, when I read, a lot of times I'll start with Audible, and I'll listen to something, and if it resonates with me, then I'll listen to it and or read it together, and then take notes on it. Another thing I really like is there's so many good resources online that you can just ask for an executive summary on something, and if you've already listened to it, you can read through those main points and without having to read the whole book again. That's an easy little hack for grabbing 80% of a book and actually internalizing it and being able to.
So you mean what I used to do in high school to write those papers on those books?
You got to listen to it first, I think. But it helps a lot.
So you just literally Google executive summary on Think Again, and you got 80% of it.
Yeah, maybe not. That one's, you got to listen to that one and read it. That one during COVID, that was probably the most, or I guess after COVID, that was one of the most. That was a very impactful book. It was very good.
This has been great. This has been awesome. Dan, I just want to say thank you. You randomly accepted, thanks to Kate here at my office, an opportunity to come on our show. You had no idea what you were walking into, I don't think, but we're so appreciative of, honestly, just sharing your perspective and being vulnerable with us today, sharing some of the insights and takeaways and things that other leaders can maybe start to apply to I think, level out. I think managers and leaders are burning themselves out as well, because they're trying to figure out how to properly evolve to the needs of today's society. So just thank you so much for your leadership, not only for your company, but also here in Rochester, because those 27 people probably know 10 other people minimally, and you just grew your impact rather than your personal success. So that's awesome.
Cool. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And thank Kate, because she's the real reason I said yes.
Yeah.